Mannam Saranyakanam Nana
Kūrma Jnanatmirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Adunulambito Bujo Kanakavadatu Sankirtanaika Pitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavatāro Vande Śrī Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Gurudaya Pushpavanto Chitra Sangdo Tamuno Vandeham Śrī Rāma Krishna Abhayo Charana Sako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subalapriyo Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye.
Shri Gaudiya Vaishnav Guru Parampara Ki Jai, Shri Jiva Goswami Ki Jai, Sat Sandarbhas Ki Jai, glorious devotees. Thank you so much for attending another presentation on Shri Jiva Goswami's Krishna Sandarbha. We are now at an interesting place where Shri Jiva Goswami is going to be giving us a fortification of the Paribhasa Sutra based on different statements in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Before we proceed directly to the Anuchetas, I wanted to discuss a little bit of a parallel between his approach in this part of the Krishna Sandarbha in presenting Lord Krishna as the supreme manifestation of the absolute truth, the topmost tattva, and the logical way in which a discussion is held, the dialectic approach to logical discussions utilized in coming forward from various Indian traditions, the way the logicians discuss things. First, I'll share a little bit of a definition. The first paragraph is from a Wikipedia posting. Dialectic approach to logical discussions involves taking a thesis by an opponent, purvapaksa, and then providing its rebuttal, khandana, so as to establish the protagonist's views, siddhanta. The purvapaksa tradition required any debater first to argue from the perspective of his opponent in order to test the validity of his understanding of the opposing position, and from there to realize his own shortcomings. Only after perfecting his understanding of opposing views would he be qualified to refute them. Such debates encourage individuals to maintain flexibility of perspective and honesty, rather than seek victory egotistically. And this second quote is from a commentary on the that is a pair that shows up in the Tattva Sandarbha in discussion of the same topic, and particularly in the way the Vedanta Sutra or the Brahma Sutra is presented, how it was written. So the Vedanta Sutra is divided into 4 chapters, adhyayas, each having 4 sections, padas. These are further divided into adhikaranas, topics. And this is the important point here. Each adhikarana includes a topic statement from the Upanishads, followed by a doubt concerning that statement, then an opponent's position, purvapaksa, then the right conclusion, siddhanta, and finally, sangati, a demonstration of how the adhikarana relates to the preceding and the succeeding adhikaranas. Now, the reason I bring this up today before we enter into this next section, or I guess part, not to confuse a section, because every individual anucheta is considered a section. And those sections could be looked at in a way similar to the adhikaranas or the topics of the Vedanta Sutra. But I bring it up so that we can kind of see a parallel here in Jiva Goswami's approach. First, he's taken a statement, a Mahavakya, a Paribhasa Sutra from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he's put it forth. And you would think that the first thing that he should have done, or he could have done in presenting the Paribhasa Sutra, is to give it its all the support that he could find to fortify its position, to pound the post, so to speak, to really give it some strong standing in relationship to other statements. So therefore, one would think that this fortification of the statement Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayaṁ would have come before the section we just completed, wherein Jiva Goswami personally dealt with all of the statements from the Bhagavatam and from other scriptures and the Leela narratives from both the Bhagavatam and other scriptures, wherein one could arrive at a conclusion that is contrary to the Paribhasa. But we see that he's taking a similar approach in his presentation here at the very beginning of the Krishna Sandarbha to the way all logical argument is dealt with according to the dialectic approach. And the first thing he did is he dealt with the purvapaksas. And we can even look and dive into this a little deeper. When we talk about the purvapaksas, we're talking about really something that is interfering with a proper conceptual orientation in regards to what's put forth in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and specifically the statement that Krishna is the topmost manifestation of divinity. So this is very interesting, that if we even look to, in another way, look to what's most advantageous, is to first deal with any misconceptions that we may have in regards to any aspect of our understanding. And in the very beginning, in the stage of sadhana bhakti, before we come to bhava bhakti and attain the goal of prema bhakti, in sadhana bhakti, there's the stage of anartha nivritti, where we want to deal with any anarthas. Now, an artha is something of value, and an anartha is something that's of little or no value. It's a misplaced value. So then when we look to anarthas, they're really, we're giving credit where credit is not due. So anarthas apply not only to any attachments we may have to seeking pleasure in all the wrong places, so to speak, trying to seek enjoyment through the Lord's external energy. So there's certain things that are really detrimental to spiritual progress that the spiritual master points out at the very beginning of our practice. If you really are serious about spiritual life, you want to get these anarthas out of the way. So this stage of anartha nivritti, the sooner we can put all of these anarthas aside, the sooner we can progress nicely to the stage of steadiness or nista in the stage of sadhana bhakti. So anartha is not only just giving up our physical attachments to enjoying in all the wrong places, so to speak, but it also deals with putting our confidence in misplaced ideas. So we want to have the proper conceptual orientation. And that involves dealing with all of our doubts. So as Swami Tripurari often says, you go before the guru and you bear your doubts. You bear your soul, so to speak. I'm having trouble. I can't see how, I can't put my faith there yet. I still don't see it properly. So we put our doubts before the spiritual master, and therefore we can retire anarthas through our practice. We can retire those anarthas dealing with our senses and our attachments to sense enjoyment. And we can also put aside our doubts in regards to the proper conceptual orientation and the proper understanding of what is the philosophy, what is the Sambandha Gyan, and the proper Sambandha Gyan that situates us firmly in nista, or steadiness in our practice, and so that our faith really begins to mature nicely. So similarly, the logical approach to argument and looking at and establishing Siddhanta, first, the dealing of Purvapaksa is there. Look at any of the opposing views, or place the opposing views that your mind may have before the guru and have them dealt with in a very dignified way. And the definition here speaks to that dignity, that it's a sincere inquiry, and it's called a vada discussion. We're not interested in winning at all costs. We're not interested in simply defeating the opponent. We want to really get to the truth of the matter. And once we get to the truth of the matter, we presented the opponent or our mind's opposing arguments. Once we've dealt with those, then we can push forward nicely. So Jiva's approach here has kind of been like that from a philosophical viewpoint. The first thing he dealt with was all these arguments, statements from the Srimad Bhagavatam that appear to not conform with the understanding of Krishna's tu Bhagavan Svayaṁ, Leela narratives, and statements from other shastras also that one could put forth as an argument against the Paribhasa Sutra. So he's done that very comprehensively in the last Anucheta, which has been a few of our classes here. And now we're going forth to this next section where he's put forth the fourfold army of the Paribhasa Sutra. He's going to give to us all the support for the Paribhasa Sutra. He's dealt with the doubts. Now he's moving forth to supporting the Paribhasa Sutra and he's doing this in a fourfold way. And he's referring to it as just like an emperor is surrounded by the various divisions of his army when he goes out for battle. So he's going to support the Paribhasa Sutra, and this is really, if we look at the heart of what he's doing here, if we are establishing a loving relationship with Krishna as his devotee, we don't want to have any doubts in regards to his position. We want to have full confidence that this is the Istadeva, the manifestation of divinity, which perfectly fits it makes the most sense for us as a spiritual seeker. And as Gaudiyas coming forth from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his gracious dispensation, we're fully content as Gaudiya Vaishnavas that our whole practice, we're willing to lay at the feet of the Paribhasa Sutra of the Bhagavat Purana. This is where we find our nourishment. We are not seeking to be Ram Bhaktas. We are not seeking to worship Lakshmi Narayan in Vaikuntha. We are seeking to have a relationship with a manifestation of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. And we are convinced by our Siddhanta coming in the Gaudiya line, the Gaudiya Sampradaya, we're convinced of a Siddhanta that embraces a Mahavakya from Shastra, the Paribhasa Sutra, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Svayaṁ. You could not find a more ideal manifestation of the Lord to worship. And there are unlimited statements in support of that. And we bow down to those statements. We embrace that manifestation of the Supreme Lord, that simply you go before him dressed like a devotee with bad intent towards him, and he still gives you the most ideal position of eternal loving service to him, as he did with Putana. That is our God. So we go forward into this fourfold army today, and the first division is supportive statements. So Jiva Goswami writes in his 30th Anucheta, in this way, the formal declaration, pratijñā, Krishna, however, is Svayaṁ Bhagavān, like a great heroic emperor, single-handedly overrules hundreds of opposing statements, assimilating them into itself. Yes, just to augment the pleasure of the audience by a display of unique splendor, I will now cite other verses as well that are like the emperor's supporting fourfold army. First, in their prayers, Bhagavān Śrī Kṛṣṇa, the devas speak of his agency in the matter of the līlāvatāras. So Jiva's saying here, now I've dealt with the Purvapaksa, the opponent's statements from the Bhagavatam, from the Leela narrative, from other Shastric presentations. Now, let me give you some pleasure by a display of the unique splendor of verses that support this statement in regard to Krishna being the supreme manifestation of divinity, Svayaṁ Bhagavān. So the first quote is from the 10th canto, 2nd chapter, spoken by the devas. O Almighty Lord, reverence unto you, just as in the past you have protected us as well as the three worlds through your avatāric descents, as a fish, a horse, a tortoise, a man-lion, a boar, a swan, a kṣatriya, a brahmana, and a deva. O best of the yadus, please now remove the burden of the earth. Then Jiva concludes this Anucheta by stating, the meaning here is self-evident. Little commentary in regard to this first Anucheta in support of the fourfold army. In olden days, kings would personally lead their armies into battle. The king was the principal fighter and heroic leader. If he was weak, defeated, or killed, the battle would be lost. The army was present to support and protect the king. This is also evident from Bhagavad Gita, wherein Duryodhana requests his retinue to protect Bhishma, his commander-in-chief, and the mightiest and senior-most warrior on his side. The army had 4 divisions, chaturanga, consisting of chariots, elephants, cavalry, and infantry. At times, even when the emperor was simply journeying about on tour, he would be accompanied by his complete army with all its 4 divisions just to impress his subjects and to give them pleasure. In the spirit of this analogy, Sri Jiva says that he will cite additional verses that function like such an army, embellishing and supporting the emperor's statement. In these verses, he demonstrates that Krishna is the source of various types of avatars. He will now present a series of verses from the Bhagavatam in support of the Paribhasa Sutra. So these are not, they do not have anything, there's nothing here to argue about. These are in direct support of the statement that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, Brahma prayed to Krishna, again from the 10th canto, at the conclusion of the Brahma Vimohan Leela. O Lord and Master, O source of all, although you are unborn, you appear among the devas, the seers, as well as among human beings, beasts, and even aquatics, in order to curb the false pride of the wicked and to bless the virtuous. The meaning is self-evident. Again, it's interesting to take note that these particular prayers, first the one from the last Anucheta by the devas, and this one put forth by Lord Brahma, are direct statements to Krishna himself. Commentary in this regard: this verse forms part of Brahma's prayers to Krishna as a young cowherd boy after the former had stolen his friends and their calves to test his divinity. After 1 year, Brahma realized his mistake and also understood that Krishna is the ultimate source of everything. Thus he spoke from his own immediate realization. The word Vidatta, meaning the creator and controller of the universe, is a vocative address used most commonly to refer to Lord Brahma. In this verse, however, it refers to Krishna himself. And according to Sri Sanatana Goswami, it thus signifies he who is the source of all avatars. This is evident from the verse itself. Jiva Goswami continues. Gargamuni informed Nanda Maharaj, your son has numerous names and forms befitting his attributes and deeds. I know them, but people in general do not. Some commentary in regards to this. This verse was spoken by Gargamuni to Nanda Maharaj during Krishna's name-giving ceremony. Here, Garga confirms that Krishna has various other names and forms. This is a reference to his diverse avatars, some of which have been mentioned in the previous Anuchetas. This also implies that Sri Krishna is the original form of Bhagavan, being the source of all avatars. The negative particle, no, meaning not, can be applied both to Garga and the people in general, Jana, by the principle of the lamp on the threshold of a doorway. The logical premise there is being referred to here serves to validate the application of a word or meaning to two adjacent objects. Just as a lamp on a threshold casts light both inside and outside the room. The meaning would then be that, like people in general, Garga too does not know all the names and forms of Sri Krishna. So Krishna has unlimited names, and in those unlimited names are all his transcendental potencies, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally wrote in the second verse of his Sastastikam. So what's coming out in this commentary is Gargamuni, even himself, despite the fact that he's a wise sage with transcendental vision, so much so that he can recognize this young baby as the supreme manifestation of divinity and declare to Nanda Maharaj in a very covered way, so to speak, in a way that it does not disclose that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Gargamuni was so understanding of the position of Nanda Maharaj and his Vatsalya Ras that he didn't want to interfere with that Prem Bhakti's immense love for his son by saying, actually, this is God here. So, of course, as evident from the beginning of the 10th canto, both with Aishvarya and without. So Vasudeva and Devaki did recognize Krishna's divinity, and Yasoda and Nanda Maharaj, they did not, although he was a very wonderful child and did wonderful things. The wonder of the various Aishvarya that he displayed during his childhood age, particularly Kumar age, it never entered their mind that their son was God. He was like God. Gargamuni said he was like the Supreme Lord, and they were content with that understanding. Anything more than that, it has not been fully nourishing to their Vatsalya, their position in Vatsalya Bhav. So, but even Gargamuni, as pointed out here in the commentary, and it's evident from his verse spoken to Nanda Maharaj, even he's admitting that he can't even know all of these various names and manifestations of the Supreme Lord, Bhagavān Śrī Kṛṣṇa. So it's very pleasing to us, as Jiva Goswami has said. This is a nectarian presentation now that he's giving in support of Krishna's position, and it's nice for us to see how Jiva Goswami has put forth all these wonderful verses for our complete absorption in Krishna's topmost transcendental position. The sons of Kuvera spoke in a similar manner to Bhagavān Śrī Kṛṣṇa. The descents into bodies of you who are devoid of a material body can be known through your various acts of prowess, which are unequaled and unsurpassed and impossible to be found in any embodied being. Now, with this particular verse, spoken by the sons of Kuvera, by this particular verse, now Jiva himself is going to give some commentary to unpack it, the meaning. So he continues in the Anucheta, the expression into bodies of you who are devoid of a material body, sariresh shwasaririna, is a causative adjectival phrase expressing the reason for this knowledge, the capacity to recognize the avatars. Although you avatarically descend among embodied beings, you yourself are not embodied. from the perspective of the principle illustrated in the second Bhagavat Sandarbha, in regards to Srimad Bhagavatam 9.3, the primary meaning of the mat-up suffix in the word asaririna indicates the non-possession of a body, is irrelevant here because of the absence in him of any distinction of body and embodied, unlike the case of ordinary living beings, in whom such a distinction does apply. We have some commentary here to unpack this more for our edification. This verse was spoken by the sons of Kuvara, Nala Kuvara, and Hayagrīva after Krishna had released them from Narada's curse. Here Krishna is addressed as asariri, which literally means without a body. At the time, Krishna was standing directly in front of the two sons of Kuvara, his form distinctly visible to them. Asariri does not mean one altogether devoid of a body, but rather one devoid of a conventional relation as possessor of a body. In other words, the negation is not of the body per se, but of the distinction that normally pertains between the body and its possessor. In the case of Sri Krishna, such a distinction is irrelevant because his transcendental body, Rupa, is identical to his intrinsic being, Swarup. The relation of possessor and possessed does not apply to Bhagavan as it does to living beings in general. Now, in addition to what I have presented here from the commentary, there is a comprehensive explanation of the Sanskrit and an unpacking of that, which for Sanskrit scholars would be quite enlivening. Not having any background in that, I have not put that forth here. I could not further explain what Jiva's what's put forth in the commentary by Satyanarayan Das, who is a Sanskrit scholar, in a way that I could explain all the nuances that come forth from this one verse spoken by Nala Kuvara and Hayagrīva in the 10th canto. But what he brings out is what's summarized in this commentary, that the word asariri here does not signify that one is completely devoid of a body, but rather the Sanskrit words and how they're put forth in the verse from the Bhagavatam relate more to the fact that he does not have a conventional body. So don't read it in a conventional way. And this is the one of the great contributions of Sri Jiva Goswami, is he's able to use both the proper presentation of the Sanskrit from the Bhagavatam and various logical arguments, philosophical arguments, in such a way that we can arrive at the appropriate conclusion. And we can also see how from such a simple verse from the Bhagavatam, such a profound revelation can be arrived at in regards to the various Sanskrit words in the verse. Jiva Goswami continues in the 34th Anucheda. Moreover, Nagnajit prayed to Sri Krishna, again from the 10th canto. How may that Bhagavan be pleased with me, he the dust of whose lotus feet Lakshmi, Brahma, and Shiva, along with the guardians of the universe, eventually hold upon their heads. At appropriate times, he assumes various forms as a matter of divine play, lila, to protect the principles of dharma he himself enacts. The meaning is self-evident. Some explanation here. Nagnajit's daughter was married to Krishna. In the above verse, the clause, at appropriate times, in the above verse, the clause, at appropriate times, he assumes various forms as a matter of divine play, lila, to protect the principles of dharma he himself enacts, implies that Śrī Kṛṣṇa is the original supreme person who appears in different avatars. This statement itself is confirmed by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata apyutanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Whenever and wherever there's a decline in religious practice, so descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. Jiva continues, now quoting from Narada. Sri Narada also said, I bow down to Bhagavān Śrī Kṛṣṇa, whose intellect is ever unthwarted and who manifests exquisite avatars for the release of all living beings from material existence. He continues here to utilize commentary from Sridhar Swami. Swami Pad also comments, in this verse, Sri Narada glorifies Narayan as an avatar of Śrī Kṛṣṇa. On the basis of this statement, all these avatars are either portions, Haṁsa, or partial expansions, kala, of the Purusha. Krishna, however, is Svayaṁ Bhagavān himself. And of course, this is from the Paribhasa Sutra, 1.3.28. Continues. Therefore, since Narada offered his prayer to Krishna himself after hearing the personified Shruti's eulogy of Narayan, it is to be concluded that Śrī Kṛṣṇa is the sole object of praise, even in the prayers of the personified Shrutis. This very fact is made clear by the Shrutis themselves in verses such as 1087:23, wherein they proclaim Krishna's extraordinary characteristics of awarding liberation to his enemies. The meaning is clear. There's some extensive commentary here, and I think one of the points I wanted to make is in the commentary, so we'll just continue there. In this 87th chapter of the 10th canto, King Parikshit posed a question to Sukadeva Goswami. How can the Shrutis, or the Vedas, which are concerned with the three gunas, describe Brahman, who is devoid of the three gunas, ineffable and beyond cause and effect? In response to this question, Sukadeva recounted the story of the meeting between Narada Muni and the sage Narayan, to whom Narada had asked the same question. Narayana Rishi responded by repeating the answer given to this question by the sage Sanandana, who in turn recited the prayers of the Shrutis personified. These prayers were uttered at the onset of a new creation cycle to awaken Paramatma, Narayan, who is reposing in the sleep of supraconscious being, Yoga Nidra, after the dissolution of the cosmos. The principal verse of this Anucheta was spoken by Narada after hearing these prayers. In this verse, although Narada was directly in the presence of the sage Narayan, from whom he had heard the reply to his question, he prays instead to Śrī Kṛṣṇa, whom he identifies as Bhagavān. Narada recognized the one among Krishna's many avatars. Although the Shrutis' prayers were directed to Narayan, the Paramatma, and not to Narayan, the sage, Narada concludes the chapter by praying to Krishna, who is the source of all avatars. In other words, he understood that the Shrutis' prayers were in fact aimed at Krishna and not Narayan. This conclusion is supported by verse 1087:23. This is from the prayers of the personified Vedas, wherein the Shrutis specify the ultimate truth as he who awards liberation to the enemies that he kills. This unique quality is found only in Krishna and not in any other avatar, as discussed in Anucheta 29. So Jiva's already presented an in-depth discussion regarding this specific quality of Bhagavan Śrī Kṛṣṇa in regards to the liberation of the asuras, or his enemies. As such, he alone is the reality to whom the Shrutis' prayers are directed. The full verse cited from the Shruti Stuti is as follows. And then we quote from the prayers of the personified Vedas. Simply by remembrance of you, out of fear or malice, even your enemies attain the same truth that the sages contemplate within their hearts while regulating the vital breath, mind, and senses through resolute engagement in yoga. The women of Vraj, whose minds are firmly fixed upon your stout serpentine arms, and we too, who share the same internal disposition as them, and who are intent upon the nectar of your lotus feet, are equal in your eyes. A profound statement that even those that are inimical and in their approach to Krishna are receiving because they are approaching Krishna because of his disposition, his amazing charitable disposition, one of his most magnificent, in fact, some sages would say the emperor of all his qualities, that even great sages that go to immense trouble to control their mind and senses through the practice of yoga, even those that are inimical towards receiving the same result. And here it's interesting that the Shrutis themselves are putting forth the fact that their internal disposition is the same as the gopis of Vraj, that they want to enter into a relationship with the Supreme Lord in that mood. And they're placing that in the same verse where they're speaking of in the beginning of the verse, the attainment of those that are inimical. So quite an extraordinary statement here in the commentary. So we can see this beginning section in support of the Paribhasa Sutra, the first division of the Fourfold Army, is dealing primarily with entering into the understanding that all the various manifestations, all the avatāric descents coming from Krishna are contained within him. So even when we look to various prayers that are put forth, if we have this understanding of Krishna's tu Bhagavān Svayaṁ, and we carefully look to various prayers and see how they're worded, in this instance, by the Shrutis. It would appear that they're praying to Narayan, but they reveal through the prayers that actually they're seeing Narayan as a transparent vine media, so to speak, Krishna, who is really their Istadeva. And similarly, the statement by Narada that even though he's in a discussion with Narayan, his prayer is directed towards Krishna, because he's not really, they're really not seeing a distinction. They know that all these manifestations of divinity, all these avatāric descents, pouring forth unlimited manifestations, uncountable avatāric descents, they're all different manifestations of Krishna. So we've dealt first with different līlāvatāras, and now we go to verses from the Bhagavatam wherein even the guna avatars are seen as manifestations, direct manifestations of Krishna. Sri Sukha speaks of Sri Krishna's agency in regards to the guna avatars. And now a verse from the 11th canto. Being questioned in this way by Uddhava, whose mind was exceedingly attached to him, Sri Krishna, the supreme ruler of all rulers, who plays with the cosmos like a toy, and who assumed the three forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva through his potencies, replied with an enchanting, loving smile. The Anucheta continues, the meaning is self-evident. In this regard, verse 10, 14, 19, which was cited earlier in the Bhagavat Sandarbha, should also be considered. You are the Supreme Self. To those ignorant of your true position, you yourself expand your Maya and appear within the non-self, within inert matter, as me, Brahma, for the creation of the universe. As this Vishnu for its maintenance, and as the three-eyed Shiva to bring about its end. Somebody's using their pencil and making annotations on our slides here. Jiva Goswami continues. Additionally, Sri Bhishma speaks of Bhagavān Śrī Kṛṣṇa's agency in regard to the Purusha avatars as well. Thus, I have fixed my mind, which is free from all hankerings, on Bhagavān Śrī Kṛṣṇa, the foremost of the Sattvatas, who is the greatest Vibhumni, who is situated in his own intrinsic bliss, and who, for the sake of his cosmic play, sometimes accepts his own prakriti, from which evolves the flow of universal being. Next, Jiva Goswami is going to unpack this a little bit for our edification. Swami Pad's comment is as follows, again, quoting the Venerable Sridhar Swami. With the intent of praying for the supreme fruit in the form of love for Śrī Kṛṣṇa, Bhishma first offers up his own deeds in this verse. The greatest, vibhumni, means that entity in reference to whom all greatness, bhuma, vanishes, v, signifying that apart from him, there is no greatness elsewhere. Bhishma then points out that very supreme glory with the words, who is situated in his own intrinsic bliss, meaning that he is always already established in the attainment of the supreme bliss that is innate to his own being. Sometimes he accepts prakriti for the sake of his cosmic play. This indicates that he does not become subservient to prakriti, like the individual living beings, through concealment of his intrinsic nature. Bhishma further expands on the nature of Bhagavan's acceptance of prakriti for the sake of cosmic play. He plays with prakriti in such a manner that from it evolves the flow of universal being, the unfoldment of creation. And it concludes here. The exact same point is confirmed by the devas in their prayers to Śrī Kṛṣṇa. Narrated in the 11th canto. The Purusha, who has unfailing prowess, acquired his creative power from you in conjunction with Maya, through Maya's instrumentality. He upholds Mahat, the first evolute, which is like the womb of the cosmos. Swamipad also comments, having attained power from you, the Purusha, in conjunction with Maya, upholds Mahat. In what manner is Mahat upheld? Like the womb of the cosmos. We'll conclude today's discussion with a little bit of commentary. Bhishma is one of the 12 illustrious personalities, Mahajans, who are fully conversant with the truth regarding Bhagavan, Bhagavat Dharma. Thus, his words are authoritative. The very fact that he lay for 52 days on a bed of arrows that pierced his body without any food and was able to speak lucidly on complex matters to King Yudhisthira is evidence of his extraordinary qualification. It also implies that he was not conditioned by his material body and was situated in awareness of the self. In Bhishma's statement, the word vibhumni is highly significant. It refers to that entity who is supreme or unparalleled in qualities. The clause prakritim upayusi, who accepts prakriti, implies that Krishna is the impelling agent of the Purusha avatars. He is ever situated in his own intrinsic bliss and never becomes influenced by Maya. This is corroborated by the second verse cited in this Anucheta, wherein the devas state in their prayers to Krishna that the Purusha obtains his creative power, virya, from Krishna. This means that the Purusha is not independent of Krishna. So we will conclude there with this first of the first discussion of the first division of the Fourfold Army in support of the Paribhasa Sutra. There are some more verses which we will continue with in this first division of the army in our next discussion, and then we'll move on to the second division. So there's 4 divisions put forth here, all in support of the Paribhasa Sutra, so that we as practitioners can have the absolute proper conceptual orientation in regards to Sambandha Gyan related to Bhagavān Śrī Kṛṣṇa, Aristadev, the aspiration of our devotional practice. Are there any questions in this regard? If not, I will thank you so much for being honored by your presence in this discussion. And hope to see you again soon. Vanchakalpatubhyascha, kripasindubhyevacha, patitanam pavanebhyo, Vaishnavijya namo namaha. Hare Krishna. Thank you again.
Dulal Chandra Prabhu ki jai.
Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tanapano Premamritam Banidhi Dhira Dhira Jana Priyau Priyakarau Nirmasanau Pujitau Sri